One secret. One body carrying the proof. Central Virginia, 1855. White columns like teeth. Tobacco fields like a sea. And inside the big house, a young heiress touches her belly and whispers a name she can't say out loud. Katherine Ashworth, 24. Wealth wrapped in silk. Marcus, 27. Enslaved, literate, watched. Love crossed the line where the law built a wall. It happened in a garden that smelled of magnolia and rain. It grew in words first, then hands, then silence. Then it left a sign no sermon could erase. A child. By dawn, the county hums like a hive. Overseers count men. Mothers hide sons. Father sharpens wrath to a point. Because if this is true, the ledger will bleed. Before we open the record, subscribe and comment your state below. Because stories like this were buried, and someone needs to unearth them. They said love here was a crime. They said God agreed. But a heartbeat keeps its own counsel. When love becomes a hanging offense, do you still call it sin or salvation? Central Virginia, 1854. A road of packed red clay cuts through rolling hills and tobacco rows that lift their leaves like open palms begging the sun. At the end of that road rises Rosewood Manor, a house built to be seen, and a life built on who must not be seen. White columns, deep porches, a brass knocker cool as judgment. The Ashworth name carved into the lintel like a prayer someone intends God to read. 3,000 acres, 412 enslaved souls, 6 generations of profit recorded in a leather ledger that smells of ink, molasses, and sweat. In the county seat, men tip hats to Master Charles Ashworth the way sailors watch a lighthouse. Useful, distant, impossible. He holds land like a title and people like tools. He speaks softly in public and loudly at home. He reads scripture with a finger marking the verse that keeps the world arranged. Master above, slave below. All of it blessed by custom and fear. The manor's heartbeat is the bell. At dawn it cracks the sky. By noon it orders the pots. At dusk it pulls bodies back to quarters. Nothing disobeys the bell without consequence. Steel rides inside its tone. There is beauty here, the kind that confuses strangers. Dogwood trees bloom like white hands opening. Fireflies stitch green light in the dark. The river carries songs down from the Blue Ridge and pretends not to hear the other sounds. A whip cutting air. A door locking. A prayer set into a pillow to keep it quiet. Beauty and cruelty live like neighbors. They borrow from each other. The house has rooms that perform. The parlor displays portraits of men who wore powdered hair and believed order could be painted into existence. The dining room is a theater where silver laughs under candlelight and deals are folded into grace. The study is where the ledger lives. Numbers line up like soldiers. Columns march. Totals stand at attention. Every life on the place fits somewhere between debit and credit, either cost of feed or price of flesh. Katherine moves through these rooms like someone born inside a story and already suspicious of the ending. Finishing school softened her voice and sharpened her mind. In Richmond, she learned poetry and duty. She returned knowing both were weapons. She reads Emerson when no one is watching and asks questions when everyone is. Her mother calls it a phase. Her father calls it trouble. The minister calls it pride. Katherine calls it thinking. Outside, the world turns because hands make it turn. Men in the lower fields check for hornworms and drought. Women in head wraps pull laundry from boiling kettles and test the wind for rain. Children run errands that feel like childhood until someone says, hush, and the day grows older all at once. The overseer rides the fence row with a slouch hat and a pistol. He counts, not people, but tasks. He believes mercy is north of here and thus not his concern. And there is the garden. Technically, it is a pleasure garden. Roses, jasmine, magnolia, white gravel paths that crunch like dry sugar underfoot. But it is also a classroom without walls. A sanctuary disguised as a hobby. Katherine spends mornings here with books and afternoons with watercolors. She speaks the names of flowers the way some people speak the names of saints. It is in this walled Eden that the story will change its shape. Marcus works here because the house believes he is safe. He is careful, quiet, and literate, the last of which is a secret that is both gift and blade. He learned by listening through a door not meant for him, letters slipping into his mind like moths through a crack. He keeps his knowledge folded small, like a note he can hide in his palm. Katherine notices the way he prunes roses. Patient, precise, unwilling to waste a living thing. She notices the way he listens when she reads verses under her breath. She asks a question about a line. He answers with a question about a word. A door opens that neither of them names. In a place where every sentence has a script, they begin to speak off-book. The county does not see this yet. The county sees dances, auctions, weddings, funerals, each with rules all supervised by eyes. The county loves a story that ends how it began. Master in front, everyone else behind. But every order has a hairline crack, invisible until the light hits just right. At Rosewood, the crack runs through the garden gate. Night in the quarters is a different country. The bell sleeps. Voices rise. Cornbread cools on a plank. A fiddle finds its note. Someone tells a story about a trickster who outwits a lion. Someone else says, "Hush now, child." Prayers are said aloud in one cabin, in whispers in another. And in the back of a third, a grandmother ties a string around a wrist for protection, against evil seen and unseen. Hope drafts itself in low light. In the big house, hope is a word for markets. In the quarters, hope is a verb. Dates matter to counties like this. They measure things that bleed. Harvest yields, court days, births, punishments. Our anchor today is simple enough to fit in the palm. 1854. The last year before the ledger learns a new language. Before law meets a heartbeat and can't balance the math. Remember these numbers as the story moves. 3,000 acres. 412 enslaved. One garden, one door. One choice. If a door keeps you in, who is it keeping out? Central Virginia. Rosewood Manor. A ledger, a garden, and a question that won't stay quiet. Marcus was born into chains, but his mind refused them. He entered the world in a cabin where straw crunched underfoot and smoke curled through rafters. His mother died before his 10th year, fever burning her body as if the land itself demanded payment. By 12, Marcus was sent into the fields. By 16, he was chosen for the gardens, not because of privilege, but because the Ashworths thought him quiet, reliable, less likely to run. But Marcus carried a secret. He could read, not from lessons meant for him. Virginia law forbade that. It was stolen knowledge gathered in silence. As a boy, he lingered near the schoolroom, where young Master William stumbled through Latin declensions and English verse. William yawned, complained, forgot. Marcus listened, remembered, and learned. Letters became doors. Books became maps. He read without touching a page, each word stitched into his memory like a forbidden tattoo. In the quarters, literacy was a crime worth lashes or worse. To read was to rise above property, to trespass into a realm whites called their own. So Marcus kept his secret folded small, letting it surface only in trusted whispers. A psalm recited more perfectly than expected. A proverb explained with meaning deeper than his years. Others noticed, but none betrayed him. Knowledge was dangerous, but so was ignorance. By 27, Marcus walked the gardens with pruning shears in hand and verses in his head. Roses bent to his will, their thorns no sharper than the words he carried in silence. He studied the way roots spread, the way branches reached for light, the way survival required both patience and stubbornness. And in every plant he saw a mirror of himself, cut back but still growing. The Ashworth family thought him tame. But in truth, Marcus was waiting. What does a man do when his only freedom lies in thought? He hides it until the right ear comes along. That ear belonged to Katherine Ashworth. She first noticed the precision of his work, roses pruned with symmetry, hedges shaped like geometry itself. But it was the way his eyes lingered on her book one morning, just a flicker, that shifted everything. Most slaves avoided the sight of white words. Marcus looked hungry. "You've read Emerson?" she asked, her voice a mix of suspicion and wonder. Marcus did not lie. "I listened when your brother studied." The air thickened. This was not safe ground, but Katherine did not call the overseer. She did not raise alarm. Instead, she smiled and asked him a question from the page. He answered, correctly, clearly, and a door opened between them. From that day, their conversations bloomed like her roses. Philosophy, poetry. The Bible read not as law, but as challenge. She asked. He replied. Then he asked, and she listened. In a land where speech was supposed to flow in one direction, down from master to slave, theirs became a dialogue. Equal. Dangerous. At night, Marcus lay in the quarters, staring at the rafters. He told himself these talks were only words, that she was curious, nothing more. But words had weight. They carved paths where feet soon followed. Katherine treated him not as property, but as a person. She pressed him with questions about freedom, about faith, about what dignity meant to a man born without it. He answered carefully but honestly. Knowledge, he said once, is the only freedom they cannot chain. In those moments, Marcus felt both exposed and alive. He knew the risk. Discovery meant rope, fire, or iron. But he also knew that silence was another kind of death. The county around them preached that slavery was natural, ordained. Yet here in the garden, one woman was beginning to doubt, and one man was bold enough to feed her doubts. Marcus did not yet call it love. He called it survival, connection, a spark lit in a dark place. But history teaches us sparks do not stay small. Question for you. If you were told knowledge itself was illegal, would you risk learning anyway? Marcus did. And that choice, that single act of rebellion through letters and words, would become the root of a scandal that shook Virginia to its core. Katherine Ashworth was born into silk, but silk can strangle as easily as it softens. She was 24 when the story begins, heir to a fortune measured not in coin but in bodies. Rosewood Manor was her inheritance, the land, the house, the ledgers, and the people written inside them. From birth, her life was scripted. Marry well, bear heirs, preserve the family standing. Yet Katherine had the one flaw most dangerous to Southern order. She thought. Her beauty was the first thing neighbors spoke of. Pale skin, auburn hair that caught fire in the sun, green eyes bright as Virginia's spring hills. Suitors whispered her name across the county. Mothers dreamed of her for their sons. To society, Katherine was a prize. To her father, she was leverage. But Richmond had altered her. At finishing school, she had studied poetry, philosophy, languages. She discovered that the world contained more than ledgers and tea parties. She read Wordsworth, Byron, Emerson, voices that questioned, voices that dreamed. She returned to Rosewood with questions of her own. How can the Bible preach love, she asked her mother one evening, and yet bless the chains on the men who cook our meals? Mrs. Ashworth dismissed it with a smile tight as lace. Don't speak like that in company, but Katherine did. She spoke in drawing rooms, at church suppers, even before guests. She asked why sermons about obedience never mentioned justice, why God's creation could be bought and sold, why bloodlines mattered more than souls. These questions cracked polite conversation like thunder on a still day. Her father called it unbecoming. The minister called it dangerous. Katherine called it truth. In the county's eyes, she was a contradiction. A young woman expected to embody obedience, yet brimming with ideas sharper than any man's blade. Beauty excused her for a time. Men forgave a pretty mouth speaking troublesome words. But whispers grew. Headstrong. Willful. Unfeminine. Words designed to warn her back into silence. She refused. Instead, she found her sanctuary in the garden. Morning among roses, afternoons with a brush dipped in watercolor. She painted not just flowers but freedom, vines curling past fences, skies wider than any man's authority. She lingered in verses that spoke of souls equal before God. Each page pulled her further from the script written for her. Katherine noticed Marcus not because he bowed, but because he didn't avert his eyes quickly enough. She saw intelligence there, a mirror of her own restlessness. One morning she risked the question, "You've read Emerson?" The answer startled her. Yes, he had listened, learned in secret. She should have scolded. She should have turned away. Instead, she leaned closer. From that moment, the garden ceased to be only a hobby. It became a classroom, a confession booth, a dangerous bridge across the gulf society had built. She asked. He answered. He asked. She listened. In Marcus, she discovered not only intellect, but courage, the quiet defiance of a man who dared to learn when knowledge itself was forbidden. And in Katherine, Marcus found something rarer still, a white woman who believed his words mattered. Day by day, their conversations grew bolder. She asked about freedom. He asked about faith. She questioned the morality of owning another soul. He described what dignity meant in bondage. Each word carried risk, but each word also carved deeper into the wall that divided them. Neighbors thought they saw only a dutiful daughter strolling among flowers. In truth, Katherine was already stepping outside the cage her family had built. Her parents planned matches. Young Charles Peaton, heir to a neighboring estate. Wealth, land, cruelty enough to suit. To them, he was the perfect partner. To Katherine, he was a coffin with a smile. "I will not marry a man who sees human beings as cattle," she told her mother. The reply was frost itself. "Then you will destroy this family." But Katherine was already destroying something else. The illusion that wealth and whiteness guaranteed obedience. History remembers heiresses for jewels and gowns. But Katherine's jewel was her mind, and her gown was rebellion stitched in silk. She did not yet call it love, but she knew that Marcus's voice stirred her more than any suitor's compliment. And she knew that every time she asked a forbidden question, she was pulling herself further from the safety of her bloodline, closer to a fire no one could extinguish. Her beauty was praised. Her obedience was expected, but her defiance, and that was the danger. The garden was meant for flowers, not for danger. Yet among roses and magnolia trees, a story began to bloom that could undo an entire dynasty. Katherine brought her books there each morning, leather-bound volumes filled with the voices of dead poets. Marcus came with shears, hands steady, eyes lowered, but mind alive. Their paths were supposed to run parallel, never crossing. But words have gravity, and soon words drew them together. It began with a question. "Do you believe knowledge is an accident?" Katherine asked, closing her book with a snap. Marcus paused, sweat on his brow, thorns under his fingernails. "No," he said carefully. "Knowledge is choice. You have to reach for it. Even when reaching cuts," the answer unsettled her. Not because it was wrong, but because it was too right. She pressed him. He pressed back. And for the first time, the heiress and the enslaved man spoke as equals. Every day after, their conversations deepened. She read Byron aloud, and he answered with fragments remembered from overheard lessons. She spoke of the philosophers, and he challenged her to apply their ideals not to Europe, but to the fields surrounding them. He told her knowledge was the only freedom that could not be chained. She told him freedom without knowledge was only another form of slavery. Together, they built a dialogue neither law nor scripture allowed. The garden paths became their map. At the bench by the fountain, she asked about his dreams. "Do you ever imagine yourself free, Marcus?" His hands hesitated over the shears. He whispered, "Every day. But lately, I imagine something else too." He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. Her eyes already held the answer. At the jasmine trellis, she dared to voice her doubts aloud. "How can it be God's will?" she said. that some are born to serve and others to command. How can love and bondage grow from the same soil? He had no safe reply. Yet his silence spoke louder than sermons. At the rose beds, their fingers brushed when she handed him a book. It was not deliberate, or maybe it was. Either way, the air thickened. Every touch carried the weight of a gallows rope. Yet neither pulled back quickly enough. Each conversation left them more exposed. Every word chipped away at the wall society had built between them. And yet neither could stop. The county did not notice, not yet. To neighbors, Katherine remained the dutiful daughter walking her garden. To overseers, Marcus remained the silent gardener pruning roses. But anyone looking closely would have seen it. The pause before speaking, the faint smile when she quoted his words back to him, the way his shoulders lifted not with labor, but with quiet pride when she listened. Night in the quarters, Marcus replayed her voice. "Do you ever dream of being free?" she had asked, and his answer, every day, echoed like a promise he couldn't keep. He told himself it was only talk, only words. But words are seeds, and seeds always grow. Night in the manor, Katherine lingered on his replies. His mind was sharper than the polished suitors who came calling with practiced compliments. Marcus spoke truth, not flattery. He carried scars, not pretensions. He questioned, resisted, believed. And she realized her heart leaned toward danger. Both knew discovery meant ruin. Virginia law was merciless. A black man accused of touching a white woman faced death by rope or fire. A white woman accused of welcoming it faced exile, disgrace, or worse. Yet in the garden, those laws felt smaller than the beating of two hearts. By autumn, their conversations had crossed a line neither could retreat from. They spoke not only of books and freedom, but of longing. The words turned softer, closer, and silence itself became dangerous. Because silence begged to be broken by touch. Question for you. Would you have spoken or stayed silent? Because silence is safe, but silence never changes history. And at Rosewood Manor, history was already shifting. One whispered question, one dangerous answer at a time. The line was always there, invisible but sharp as a blade, between white and black, between master and slave, between life and death. For months, Marcus and Katherine had walked dangerously close to it. Conversations became confessions. Glances lingered, hands brushed, and one evening, under the weight of summer air, the line broke. It happened in the old tobacco barn, a building long abandoned, its rafters sagging, its walls perfumed with hay and smoke. For Marcus, it was shelter. For Katherine, it was escape. For both, it was the only place the world could not watch. She arrived first, candle flickering in her hand. He followed, cautious, eyes scanning the shadows. Neither spoke at first. Words had carried them this far. But words were no longer enough. Her hands trembled when she set the candle down. His hands trembled when he reached for hers. They both knew this was treason. Not against family, not against Virginia, but against an entire order designed to keep them apart. Their first kiss was not soft. It was desperate. It was the kind of kiss born from silence stretched too long, from questions left unanswered. Her lips against his meant death if discovered, yet in that moment death seemed preferable to denial. Katherine pulled back first, breath ragged. "If anyone finds out," she whispered. Marcus cut her short. "They already know enough to hang me. One more secret won't change it." She laughed, but her laugh was broken, half sob, half defiance. "Then let it be love, not silence, that damns us." In the hay-scented dark, they crossed every boundary. Her pale body against his scarred flesh was more than passion. It was rebellion carved into skin. Each touch erased a line the law had written. Each gasp defied the sermons preached from pulpits. And each heartbeat pounded louder than the bell that ordered their lives. By the time the candle guttered low, they were no longer heiress and slave. They were simply two people clinging to the only freedom either had ever known. Yet freedom came laced with fear. Marcus lay awake afterward, watching moonlight slip through the cracks in the barn wall. He imagined ropes, dogs, flames. He imagined Catherine's name dragged through the county, her body locked away in shame. He whispered into the darkness, "They'll kill me if they find out." She rolled toward him, eyes wet, voice steady. "Then they'll kill us both. But they will never kill what we felt tonight." Danger pressed itself against every moment that followed. They met in secret, in shadows. They spoke less now, touched more. What once lived in words now lived in stolen hours of skin and breath. By day, they wore masks. Katherine poured tea, received suitors, practiced the role her family demanded. Marcus pruned roses, hauled water, bowed his head. But both carried the barn in their bodies, and both carried the knowledge that time itself was their enemy. The overseer noticed Marcus's distracted silence. Her mother noticed Catherine's restless glances. Her father noticed the way she lingered too long in the garden. The walls of Rosewood began to narrow. Still, neither could stop, because once the line is crossed, you cannot uncross it. Once you touch fire, you carry the burn. That summer night in the barn bound them together. Love was no longer an idea. It was flesh. It was breath. It was a secret swelling into something neither could contain. Anchor image, one kiss, and the noose was already waiting. Question for you. If your heart defied the law, would you silence it? Or follow it into the fire? Winter draped Rosewood in silence. Snow pressed against the fields, muting the sound of hounds and chains. But silence cannot smother truth forever. Truth moves, it grows, it kicks. By February of 1855, Katherine could no longer deny it. Her body was changing. The flush in her cheeks, the sickness in her mornings, the swelling curve beneath her dress. She carried Marcus's child. She told him in the barn before dawn, her voice breaking like ice on the river. "Marcus, I think I'm with child." The word struck harder than any lash. He dropped his tools, heart hammering louder than the bell. "Are you certain?" Her eyes held his, as certain as a woman can be without a physician. "My courses have stopped. My body, it's different. Marcus, our love has taken root." He staggered back, mind racing. Virginia law was merciless. For a slave to touch a white woman meant death. To father her child was beyond crime. It was apocalypse. "They'll kill me," he whispered. "And they'll destroy you." But Katherine did not flinch. "Then let them try. I will not call this child a sin. I will call it ours." She spoke with a courage that chilled him. In her defiance, he saw both salvation and ruin. The barn became a war council. They whispered plans. Escape north, follow the river, reach Ohio, find life where the law held less power. Katherine promised money, jewels, family heirlooms she could sell. Marcus pictured hounds on his trail, patrols at every crossing, the price on his head. "Even if we reach the north," he said. "What then? You, a white heiress. Me, a runaway slave. Every face will turn against us." Her hand found his. Not every face. Some will see truth. Some will see love. But the truth in her womb was not patient. Every day it grew, pressing against fabric, pressing against time. Loose gowns could hide it only so long. Servants already whispered about her pallor. Her mother's eyes lingered too long at the breakfast table. Her father's questions sharpened. The walls of Rosewood were closing. At night, Katherine pressed Marcus's hand to her belly. He felt the faint stirring of the life they had created. It filled him with awe and dread. "This child is a miracle," she whispered. He thought, "This child is a death sentence." Neighbors knocked at Rosewood's door with proposals. Charles Peaton most of all, rich with land, cruel with certainty. Master Ashworth encouraged the match, eager to bind Katherine into a union that would protect the family name. She resisted, citing headaches, faintness, excuses. But the clock was ticking. A belly cannot lie. Every conversation grew heavier. Every kiss tasted of fear. The barn, once their sanctuary, now felt like a cell with walls of time. Marcus prayed for a miracle, though he had little faith left. Katherine planned for rebellion, though rebellion had never spared women like her, and still the child grew. March came with thaw, and with it, suspicion. A turn in the sunlight revealed more than Katherine intended. Her father's eyes narrowed. Her mother paled. The truth was moving from secret to scandal, and soon scandal would ignite into violence. Marcus knew it. Katherine knew it. The unborn child knew nothing but warmth and heartbeat, unaware of the storm waiting outside the womb. Question for you. If you carried the child of your enemy's slave, would you hide it or claim it? Because Katherine Ashworth had already made her choice. She would claim it, even if it meant destruction. By April, suspicion walked the halls of Rosewood like a guest no one invited, yet no one could dismiss. Master Charles Ashworth had noticed his daughter's fainting spells, her loose gowns, her sudden refusal to attend Sunday suppers where eligible men paraded like livestock. Mrs. Ashworth whispered to him in corners, her eyes fixed on Katherine's changing figure. The servant spoke in murmurs too soft for white ears, but the overseer's sharp glance told Marcus he was already being measured, weighed, suspected. The storm was gathering. It broke one morning at breakfast. Katherine reached for a dish, the sun cutting across her profile. The swell beneath her dress could no longer be mistaken for indulgence. Her father's spoon dropped against the table with a sound like a musket. "Katherine," he said, voice cold as the silverware. "Come to my study." The study door closed. Shouts followed. The manor quivered. Marcus served quietly in the dining room, every syllable of rage carrying through the walls. Master Ashworth demanded names. Mrs. Ashworth wept like a woman watching a coffin lower. Katherine's voice rose once, defiant, then fell into silence. That evening, the manor changed its rhythm. Guards at Katherine's door, servants shadowing her steps, her garden walks forbidden. She had been confined, not in chains of iron, but in chains of bloodline and shame. In the quarters, whispers raced. Miss Katherine's with child. Master's furious. They say he'll question every man till the truth bleeds out. Mothers pressed sons tighter. Fathers warned boys not to glance too long at the manor house. Everyone knew what interrogation meant. That night, Martha, the cook, found Marcus alone in the garden. Her hands smelled of smoke and cornbread, her eyes heavy with years. She spoke in a voice meant for him alone. They're going to start tomorrow. Every man, every boy, they'll whip and they'll break until someone speaks. You need to run. Marcus felt the earth tilt beneath him. Run, to leave Katherine in confinement, to abandon the child they had created. Yet to stay meant certain death. His face carried both choices, neither survivable. Inside the manor, Katherine resisted her prison with words. She refused food. She refused conversation. She wrote letters no one delivered. Her father tried persuasion, then threats, then tears. "Think of your mother," he begged. "Think of this family's name." But Katherine thought only of Marcus and the life inside her. Every door in Rosewood became a wall. Every eye became a guard. And still the pregnancy grew. No dress could hide it. No excuse could erase it. Time itself was betraying them. Marcus considered escape. The river, the road north, the underground whispers. Yet his mind returned to Katherine behind her locked door. What kind of man fled while the woman who carried his child faced the wrath of her own blood? But what kind of man stayed to be broken, leaving her alone anyway? The quarters buzzed with dread. Children hushed when adults leaned close. Old men shook their heads, saying, "This won't end quiet." Even the overseer seemed tense, pacing with his whip uncoiled, waiting for orders that smelled of blood. Katherine's window flickered with candlelight each night. Marcus watched from the shadows, heart torn between the urge to climb and the fear of dooming them both. He whispered prayers not even God seemed to hear. Suspicion had hardened into certainty. The Ashworth family name was about to be dragged through mud. The only question left was how violently the truth would be extracted. And so the house became a trap, one where Marcus was hunted in silence, and Katherine was already caged. Question for you. If a door keeps you in, who does it keep out? Because Rosewood's doors no longer protected Katherine. They protected the world from the scandal growing inside her. The morning of truth came not with thunder, but with sunlight, cruel in its clarity. Master Ashworth had prepared for war. He summoned every enslaved man and boy to the yard. Overseers stood armed, whips coiled at their sides. The study doors stood open, ready to receive each suspect one by one. It was not to be justice. It was to be an inquisition. Marcus stood among the others, heart pounding like a drum in his chest. He knew what awaited. Questions sharpened into knives, truth dragged out with blood. His only chance was silence, and even silence could kill him. But Katherine had made her choice. Before her father could call the first name, the manor doors opened. She stepped onto the porch in full daylight, dressed not in shame but in her finest gown. Her belly, round with months of life, could not be denied. Gasps rose from the crowd, some shocked, some horrified, some secretly thrilled that the mighty Ashworth name was cracked at last. Her father rushed forward, face purple with fury. "Get inside this house, girl!" But Katherine raised her chin. Her voice carried clear across the yard. "No, I will not hide. Not from you. Not from anyone." Every whip, every gun, every whisper froze. She turned to the crowd, her hands folded gently across her stomach. This child, you see, was not forced. It was not sin. It was born of love. Her father's roar nearly drowned her words. But she pressed on louder. "Marcus is the father. I love him. He loves me, and no lash, no law will make me deny it." The yard erupted. Women clasped hands to mouths. Men shook their heads, muttering prayers or curses. The overseer's jaw dropped as though the earth itself had tilted. For the enslaved, it was a moment carved from fire, one of their own named openly as equal to the master's daughter. For Marcus, time fractured. He heard his name spoken, heard the crowd ripple, felt every eye burn into his flesh. He wanted to run, wanted to stand still, wanted to shout, wanted to weep. Master Ashworth's voice split the air. "Seize him. Bring me that animal who defiled my daughter." Marcus moved before they could. His legs carried him across the yard, past the stunned crowd, toward the fields. Shouts followed. Boots thundered. The baying of hounds rose in the distance. Behind him, Katherine was dragged back toward the manor. She did not resist. Her confession had already been made. She had set fire to the script her family had written for her, and now she would burn with it. Marcus ran through Tobacco Row, still slick with morning dew. He could hear the dogs closing, the overseers shouting. Each breath tasted of fear and freedom, mingled like blood and smoke. The river shimmered in the distance, cold, dark, wide. If he reached it, perhaps he could live another day. If not, his body would be dragged back to Rosewood as a warning. But behind him, Katherine's voice echoed in memory. "I love you. I will not pretend otherwise." Her defiance had bought him these few moments, a sliver of time cut from eternity. Enough maybe to escape. In the quarters that night, whispers spread like wildfire. Some said Marcus had reached the river. Others swore the hounds dragged him down. But the truth mattered less than the spectacle. An heiress had confessed before God and county that she loved her father's slave, that she carried his child. It was scandal, it was sacrilege, it was history cracking open in daylight. Question for you. If you were Marcus, would you have run, or turned to face the noose? Because sometimes survival is not cowardice. Sometimes it is the only form of defiance left. Scandal spreads faster than fire in dry fields. By summer of 1855, every plantation in central Virginia whispered the same words. The Ashworth heiress carries a slave's child. For Master Ashworth, the disgrace was unbearable. He could not erase what Katherine had declared in front of hundreds. He could not kill her without killing the grandchild she carried. And so he chose exile, not for Marcus, who had already fled, but for his own daughter. By autumn, arrangements were made in secret. Katherine would be sent to relatives in the Caribbean, far from Virginia's watchful eyes, far from the polite society that had once celebrated her beauty. Officially, it was for her health. In truth, it was to bury the scandal in salt water and distance. She sailed from Norfolk on a gray morning, stomach heavy with child, heart heavier still. Behind her, Rosewood's white columns shrank into horizon mist. Ahead, unknown shores waited. She pressed her hands to her belly and whispered, "You are not shame. You are hope." Marcus was not on that ship. He had escaped north, carried by whispers of the Underground Railroad, moving like a hunted shadow through Maryland woods and Pennsylvania barns. He thought of Katherine every night, prayed for her survival, begged God for a reunion. But their paths had split. She was cast to the sea, he to the fugitives' road. In Jamaica, Katherine found a different world. Here skin color was not invisible, but it was not hidden either. Plantations still thrived, but rebellion's echo lingered stronger. Mulatto children walked openly. Black and white mixed in streets and schools, if not in full equality. At least in fuller presence than Virginia would allow. Her daughter was born in December of 1855. Katherine named her Hope. Hope's skin was cafe with cream, her eyes green as her mother's, her curls catching sunlight like questions no law could silence. To Katherine, she was perfect. To her relatives, she was proof. Proof of Katherine's sin, proof of her defiance, proof of the shame they had been tasked to contain. But Katherine refused shame. She nursed her daughter in daylight. She carried her to church. She spoke her father's name, Marcus, in the lullabies whispered over the crib. "Your father was brave," she said. "Your father loved you before you ever drew breath." Letters traveled slowly across seas and borders, smuggled by abolitionists. In one, Katherine wrote, "She smiles when she hears music. She grips my finger like she's holding the whole world. She is your daughter, Marcus. She carries your strength in her fists." Marcus wept when he read it in a cold Pennsylvania loft, clutching the paper like scripture. Freedom felt hollow without them, but knowing they lived gave his fugitive life meaning. Meanwhile, Katherine began to teach. She opened a small school in Kingston, offering lessons to children who looked like hope. Children too often told they were half one thing and half another, belonging nowhere. She taught them to read, to question, to hope. In every lesson, she defied the world that had cast her out. But exile has its cost. Tropical fevers weakened her body. Loneliness cut her spirit. Each night she looked to the horizon as if Virginia might appear again, bringing Marcus with it. She grew thinner, paler, though her resolve burned undimmed. Her relatives called her stubborn. Her neighbors called her dangerous. Katherine called herself free. Hope grew, laughing in island sunlight, chasing birds through courtyards. She carried two legacies in her small frame: the wealth of an old Virginia dynasty, and the rebellion of a man who dared to love its daughter. Back in Virginia, the Ashworths never spoke her name. At Rosewood, servants said the mistress had died abroad, the child lost. But in Kingston, Katherine was alive, and hope was thriving, proof that truth cannot be erased by distance. Question for you. Do you think history remembers the truth, or just the winners? Because in Virginia's ledgers, Katherine was gone, but in the Caribbean her daughter lived, and her name was Hope. Exile buys time, but never peace. By 1860, Katherine Ashworth had built a fragile life in Jamaica. She taught children of every shade, from pale to dark, in a one-room schoolhouse that smelled of chalk and sea salt. Hope, now 5 years old, chased lizards across the dusty yard, her laughter a hymn against history's silence. Catherine often watched her daughter with pride and with sorrow. Pride for the child's courage, sorrow for the absence of the man who had given her life meaning. Marcus was still alive. Word traveled slowly, through the same hidden networks that had once carried runaways north. In Pennsylvania, he lived as a fugitive. He worked on farms, hid in attics, worshipped in secret churches. Every letter Catherine sent, he treasured like scripture. And every update about Hope, her first step, her first word, her love of music, he memorized. Yet he never saw her face. By 1862, Catherine's health began to fail. Tropical fevers gnawed at her strength. Her body, unaccustomed to the island's plagues, weakened year after year. Still she taught. Still she sang to Hope at night. Still she whispered Marcus's name as though saying it aloud kept him beside her. In December of that year, she did not rise from her bed. Neighbors came. Doctors muttered of fever and weakness. But Catherine's last moments were not marked by despair. She gripped her daughter's hand and whispered, "You are not shame. You are promise." Then with her final breath, she called for Marcus. It was gone. Hope was 7. Her mother's death did not bury her. It made her bloom. Hope grew into a young woman shaped by loss and fire. She remembered Catherine's lessons, that love is not sin, that knowledge is a weapon, that silence is a chain. She became a teacher like her mother, carrying forward the vision that children of all colors deserved learning. Her students called her fierce. Her neighbors called her bold. History would call her forgotten. Marcus never held Catherine again, but he carried her until his last day. In Pennsylvania, he died in 1878, still clutching the only relics of their love, Catherine's final letter and Hope's infant shoes. They were worn smooth from being handled so often, talismans of a life he never fully lived, but never let go. For Virginia, the scandal faded into whispers. The Ashworth family never spoke Catherine's name in public. Rosewood's ledgers closed neatly over the missing daughter. Society moved on, pretending the disgrace had been shipped overseas with her body. But the truth lived on in a small school in Kingston, in the laughter of a girl named Hope, and in the memory of a man who had dared to read, dared to love, dared to dream. The legacy was not written in Virginia's history books. It was written in the stubborn survival of one child, Hope. Her name itself was defiance. It was the one word Catherine chose to throw against centuries of chains. And through her, the story refused to die. Anchor image. A woman gone too soon. A man who died with her name on his lips, and a daughter who carried both forward. Question for you. Is legacy measured by what the world remembers? Or by what love leaves behind? Because history buried Catherine and Marcus, but their daughter kept them alive. History likes winners. It likes neat ledgers, proud names, monuments carved in stone. But what about the stories whispered in quarters, carried in letters, hidden in attics? What about the lives that dared to cross lines society swore could never be crossed? Katherine Ashworth was supposed to be remembered as Virginia's perfect daughter, a bride draped in silk, mother of heirs, jewel of her family's dynasty. Instead, she became a ghost in her own lineage, erased by ledgers shipped overseas, her name scratched out in silence. Marcus was supposed to be remembered as nothing at all, just another hand in the garden, just another body in the ledger. Instead, he became the secret that haunted Rosewood, the man whose love turned an heiress into a rebel, the fugitive who carried her final words until his death. And their daughter, Hope, her very existence was rebellion. She was not supposed to live, yet she did. She laughed, she learned, she taught. She proved that bloodlines are not destiny, and that shame can be remade into strength. The story of Rosewood was never written in official records. You won't find it in courthouse archives or polished family histories. But you'll find it in the cracks, in whispers passed down through descendants, in abolitionist letters tucked into boxes, in the ghost of a name spoken with both pride and fear. Ask yourself, why was it buried? Why do we celebrate men who built fortunes on chains, yet silence the voices who dared to love in defiance of them? Some say Katherine was a fool. Others call her brave. Some say Marcus was reckless. Others call him a prophet of freedom. Perhaps both are true. Perhaps truth itself lives in contradiction. But here is what cannot be denied. Their love created life, and that life carried forward a question too heavy to kill. Would you risk everything, family, name, even life, for a love the world calls forbidden? For Katherine, the answer was yes. For Marcus, the answer was yes. And for their daughter Hope, the answer was her very name. Today, Rosewood Manor still stands. Its white columns gleam. Its ledgers sleep in dusty archives. Visitors see polished wood, portraits, and manicured gardens. They are not told about the night an heiress confessed her love for her slave. They are not told about the child who carried both her parents' defiance in her blood. But if you stand there long enough, if you walk the gravel paths where roses once bloomed, perhaps you'll hear it. The echo of voices not meant to meet yet drawn together. The sound of a woman saying, "I love him." The sound of a man whispering, "They'll kill me if they know." The faint laughter of a child named Hope, carried by the wind. History may not write these sounds, but silence cannot erase them. So remember Katherine. Remember Marcus. Remember the daughter who proved their love was not shame but survival. Because when a woman carried the child of her family's slave, she carried more than scandal. She carried rebellion in her body. She carried truth through fire. And she carried a question that lingers still, long after the ledgers closed. Is love ever truly forbidden, or only feared by those who cannot control it?